Hello and welcome to the LiveOps Lounge. We are here to discuss all aspects of game making for live operated games, but also design, monetization, and other topics that affect people who love the craft of making games. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Fred. Fred, tell us who you are and what you do.
Thank you very much, Oscar. So happy to be here. I appreciate the invite. My name is Fred White. I've been in the industry for about 25 years now, mostly on the marketing and publishing side. My expertise is bringing games to market, getting the audience to the games, especially with live service. I've been in live service now for about 15 plus years, both on PC and console. And so my expertise does lie in live service launch, growth, and all things LiveOps. I've worked with some big names that you may recognize: Sega, Sony, Microsoft, Amazon, a lot of small names as well.
No one important though.
Right, everyone's important, right? So
everyone's important, yeah,
and so some indies and double A's as well. So love the space, and it's been my life for most of my career.
Yeah, and I feel like I've been doing it for, I think, 98 was when I joined British Telecom's online gaming platform on dial-up modems, of all things, could you believe? So, it's been... Well, and I was delighted because you were doing a fantastic job hosting the recent at the time of recording live service gaming summit in Austin, and you said some fantastic things that really got my brain firing. And one of the things was specifically around how we're not really competing in games, we're competing for attention. And I'd love to explore what you think that means and what implications that has. So what do you I mean, I'm sure most people who are going to listen to this will know what we mean by the attention economy, but for the absence of doubt, could you describe what you mean by the attention economy?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say in my definition, the attention economy is what we are in right now in the mature games industry, right? So the number of players, while it is increasing, the number of play hours per other games is not. So right now, we're in a really interesting, challenging, tough place where when we as developers or publishers are bringing new games to market, trying to grow new games, we're no longer really competing for new users per se. We're really trying to snatch people from the games that they know and love and have invested themselves into socially, emotionally, financially, to bring them over to your game. When I first started in live service, we were competing against not many. World of Warcraft was obviously the 800-pound gorilla. Age of Conan was in there. There were a couple others.
I remember Age of Conan, yeah.
Some other, right? Some nostalgia there. And there were some others that blazed the trail. We talked about that a little bit in Austin with Asheron's Call and Ultima
Online. We had Rich Vogel there as well. Yep. So we had, I remember Meridian 59 and obviously Ultima Online, and then Star Wars Galaxies and all. Many of these. In fact, the KingsIsle guys were in the room as well. And like you say, in that kind of PC console kind of space, like you say, that these are the major life involving experiences. But I'm interested to throw in a curveball in that one, because I actually think you're probably also right in the mobile space, and that's kind of where, because I've done all PC, console, and mobile. I'm probably better known for being in mobile, even though it's not really my major stint, but in the mobile space, I think we have the same problem, but the pattern of play is different. So, for example, the match 3 type games, they become our kind of like our short form break. It's that thing I do to take a few minutes, a bit more healthy than going off and having a cigarette. It's that kind of more comfortable me time to fill a gap. But I think to your point, it's just how many gaps and how big is the game and what does it fit? What's the commitment? What do you think that means for game design?
Well, I think, you bring up an interesting point with mobile, right? So we're seeing a bit of a divergence with mobile games versus PC console. And most of my background is in PC console. So I take that lens when I've dived into the mobile pool. But what I'm seeing, and I think what we as an industry are seeing right now, is what you brought up, which is mobile has become what you do when you're waiting for the bus, what the kids do between classes or during study hall when they have 5 or 10 minutes. And what that translates into as far as game design, there's a number of ways that goes. Is it a match 3? Is it jumping on to play a level of Candy Crush, or is it going into a mobile MMO or a strategy-based tactical battle where you've got 5 or 10 minutes to kind of have this little gem of gameplay. PC can be the same way, but what we're seeing is folks that are, looking for kind of a bigger, richer experience, maybe, are more on sitting down in front of their consoles and PCs or on their laptops versus mobile, where you're kind of pulling it out of your pocket and playing a little bit. I think there's an attention, draw in both aspects, both regards. But I think that when we're talking about, especially when we're talking about live service on PC or console, we're talking about players who that's kind of their playground. That's their social circles, these games have evolved to. And that's why they're so sticky, and that's why it's so difficult to actually wrench them from, a Fortnite, a Minecraft, a Roblox, any number of top 20 live service games to kind of try something else. And it's the same with mobile. There's different challenges with mobile. The app ecosystem is its own animal. There are so many games to choose from now. Same with PC and console, but mobile, it presents its own frictions, I think.
Games like Monopoly Go. But actually, Supercell and with Clash of Clans and Heyday, plus King with Candy Crush back in 2014, had a similar thing going on, where they were spending so much proportionately of the ad spend in the industry that they were drowning out the opportunity for other people. And again, the margin in terms of user acquisition versus revenue is so tiny, but the scales in which they're playing, it means that as long as I've got net, I mean, I'm exaggerating, but as long as I've got net plus 1 cent in my LTV, that's profit. And I totally understand why that has become a massively powerful machine around the delivery of player experiences. But it means that it puts a very different lens on the player, because they're being bombarded with ads from the same customer. Or from the same customer. No, they're being bombarded with ads from the same game. And we get the shenanigans of the way ad companies have been operating with the length and duration of the ad taking up more and more of the time of the player and creating more and more friction, reducing that LTV in the same time frame. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. It's the world that I've lived in and that we're living in as operators. I've also see I think this originally came from when free to play came, which is when also coincidentally I entered the free to play kind of world the same time I entered the live service world, because these live service games were free to play. They were coming from Korea. Sure. My charge was to take games that were working well in Korea, pick them up, bring them out to the US. I recalibrated that expectation with the stakeholders and the exec team to say it's not just the US, it's the West. It's anyone who chooses to play a game in English, right? And that's not only US and North America, but Western Europe and even some parts of Eastern Europe.
Australia.
And Latin America, Australia, exactly.
Arguably, Philippines is a country will often play in English. Yeah.
Exactly. And also, other areas and regions in Asia as well. There are Korean pockets that prefer to play in Asia. There are Japanese pockets that prefer to play in English. Same with Japan. There are pockets there that prefer to play in English. But what I've seen is kind of a convergence of free-to-play taking hold and driving really that cost to the player down. It's been a race to the bottom, but the expectations of the players have not changed. The expectations of the players are going up over time. So games need to be better, the more compelling, more of a hook, but they need to be free is the current expectation, or very low cost, right?
Well, I like to frame it slightly differently than that the games are free. I think of again, I don't want people to think I mean this in terms of the player playing a game and getting a good game. But from the perspective of the commercial retail part of the game experience, the game is the store. I mean, the game is the reason to show up. And it's not that the game is free, it's that you choose to make your spend in the game after or during your experience playing it. And you therefore have a different decision when you're making that choice to invest in the game based around an experience you're currently having rather than an experience that you could be having. So the reason I think it's an important distinction is because I think it gets back to this attention economy question. and why I think a free-to-play experience is a better fit for an attention economy market, particularly if you think about a Netflix experience or a mainstream terrestrial TV, which still is the elephant in the room. The mainstream terrestrial TV has still got enormous audiences and enormous levels of revenue generated based on traditional ad funding. And we often forget that because we're the number one digital entertainment industry, but that's even bigger than us because that's not the same market. But the reason I think it's interesting is it's like, what am I going to go do now? And if I have to pay up front before I can choose to go play something, that thing had better compel me really, really, really demandingly. But as we get to this more and more competitive space with free to play, as there are more and more things, 100,000 mobile games, 50, 18? No. Was it 18 or 20,000 on Steam? I can't remember last year.
Per month?
No, in total over the year. I think it was like 20,000 a year or something. I can't remember. Someone will say in the comments. But a huge number of things, more than we could possibly play. And we're going to have to pick one.
Totally. And so I think you bring up a couple of interesting points. I think we're talking about the value proposition at its core, right? So because, and back in the day when I first started in live service, we could get people to try our games. We could get players to dedicate 1, 2, 3 months, and they would bring their clans with them, their friends with them. And if it were a good game, they'd stay. And if it weren't, and it didn't tickle their fancy, they'd leave. Nowadays, that's so much harder to do. You cannot, if you build it, they will come, does, no longer applies right now, right? Because of the number of games that are launching every day on mobile and on Steam. Good ones. Because the race to the bottom, the expectation has been lower, no cost. Not necessarily as the value proposition, but to get people to try the games, right? Has been lowered so much. Add to the fact that the barrier of entry for game developers has been lowered so much with new tools between Unreal and Unity and Godot, and there's so many opportunities now. Not to mention now universities taking game design seriously and having sections that classically train game devs. Not to mention the proliferation of YouTube now, and you can go and on there and learn for free game design at its core.
100%.
All that together, and now it's a great time to be a gamer, right? You've got so many great experiences out there. It's a really tough time to be a developer or publisher. So we're talking about friction. We're talking about when the price is zero, okay, I'll give it a shot. And yes, to your point, maybe the game doesn't end up being free for them. Maybe they end up spending money. The vast majority will not. We're still at a place where most games are going to be a 5%-ish are actually spending money within the game. If that's a single player game or a co-op game, there's a difference between that model and the PvP model. PvP model, you need to bring in the free players to have the meat for the paying players to prey on.
You need the critical mass.
Exactly. When it comes, so I think when we're talking about advertising, and you were saying, gosh, the ads are getting longer and longer, and it's getting more and more painful. It's just the testing and the experimentation to determine what that tipping point is. Where can you mentioned LTV for the viewers who may not understand what that metric is, lifetime value. You're measuring that against what you're spending against the development of the game, the running of the game, the advertising for the game, et cetera, et cetera. So each game is different. We see that time and time again. Oh, I think you lost me again.
Keep going. You were talking about you're going up against the running of the game, the advertising of the game.
So from a marketing and publishing perspective, that LTV number is necessary to keep tabs on because we're looking at how much.
I don't think it's me. I'm looking at my speed test. I think I'm okay at the moment.
We have had some issues with our internet lately, so it might be that. I'm so sorry.
I'm fine because remember, it's going to get edited anyway. So we're this stuff will just get cut. And then Elliot happens to be my son, but he actually is a professional video editor.
All right.
He studied filmmaking, and so I basically went, I'll hire you.
All right. Very nice.
You'll be cheap. It's not though. Yeah.
That's great. We're actually tasking my son as well. He's a high schooler, and my wife has been putting some videos together, so he's been editing for her. I'll try and finish the thought, but it is from a marketing and advertising perspective, it is very crucial to keep an eye on the LTV, on the ARPU, average revenue per user, average revenue per paying user, total revenue, et cetera. daily active users monthly, daily over monthly. All of those things are important when you're running a live service game, because you need
100%.
to make sure that you're, like you had said, if your revenue plus 1 cent is coming in, then at least there's positive there over your costs. But that tipping point can be different with every game on every platform. That's, there's a science involved, obviously, but there's an art as well to really monetizing a game to the necessary levels to keep.
I think one of the interesting things for me about this is what the mindset change that happens when we're dealing with a free-to-play experience is about understanding not just about why someone's going to want this thing now, but leaving sufficient space for them to want the thing next week, and then again, and then again. And it's that understanding that we don't just want to make you a great game. Of course, we want to do that as well. But we want to make a great game that you feel is part of your lifestyle choice. It's a part of your experiential desire, ongoing. And to my mind, that means that in some ways, why I think I'm a bit frustrated with some of the games designs that I've seen, and some where I've seen them fail, some where I don't quite understand why they've succeeded, but great for them that they have, is when they lose track of the player value. And I think that's deeply connected with the principle we're talking about with the attention economy, because for my mind, for me to want to monetize a game effectively, I've got to have somebody want to play the game and to want to do something that's they're going to purchase, that they can do something further with the game. Let's take a cosmetic item. Let's say that Hat of Wonder. If you don't want to show off you wearing the Hat of Wonder in your gameplay, you're not going to buy the hat. I think that's pretty simple. But that means that we have to overcome the other elements that I might want to be doing and the desirability of having that cosmetic thing to make sure that we're embedding the player to continue playing as well as to continue showing off in the game, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? Am I being mad? Yeah.
No, it makes total sense. Your questions are so complex and layered. You bring up so many points and aspects.
I do. I do.
And you're right on. So I think, one of the things that you're talking about too is there's a couple things there for me to unwrap. One is we talk about the content flywheel, the content treadmill, right? Making sure that your players have something new to come back to. And again, it all depends on the game itself, on the core game loop. Is this something that I come back to? Why am I coming back? Am I coming back because I love this particular mechanic? Is it because I'm trying to get to this level? Is it because I'm trying to earn enough money to buy this? Is it because my friends are playing? What is it? And I think the necessary skill that operators need to have is really knowing what their community wants, what they're doing, what they're asking for, what they need, which, by the way, are often not the same thing. Often what a community and a player will say or ask for is not what they really want or need, or if they are talking about an action they're going to take, is not necessarily the action they're going to take.
Exactly that.
That's where community management comes in. I view community management as really being under the marketing communications wing, the live operations wing. In organizations that I've been in, I've made sure that the community management falls under my section there.
I'd go further. I think if you haven't put your community team at the heart of your game, you're stuffed.
Especially nowadays. Totally. Knowing and having, and by the way, having that two-way communication, because we're talking a lot about acquisition, and now you're talking about engagement, really, and that's so important with live service. The acquisition, of course, bringing players in, but keeping them is so important. One thing I wanted to mention with we're talking about mobile games versus PC and console. The acquisition cost for mobile games has gotten so high that you had mentioned, gosh, there's King and Supercell were maybe flooding the available ad inventory. More importantly, that drives the cost up. So, it used to be where the goal, for me, was to get a $1 cost per acquisition for mobile. In other words, for every dollar that I'm spending in marketing and advertising and promotion, we're getting one player. Now that's still for free-to-play games, so there is not necessarily a guarantee that they'll be spending money. But that was kind of the goal. If you could get to one, or sub one.
At the same time, you might have a 40% day one retention. That means that 60% of those people you've lost.
Exactly. And add to that roughly 2 to 3 to, no more than 5% of the people are actually paying. So yes, the math, adds up there. So it gets, costly to do that. And one of the things that King and ABK and Supercell, they all learned was that the best way and the most efficient way of getting new users, because there's always going to be churn. So there's really two ways to stop the churn. One, make the game so great that no one wants to leave, or two, continue feeding the fire with new users. What they learned was the most cost efficient way to do that was to actually have a platform, have multiple games within that portfolio / platform. Then you can cross promote to do that. That's the most effective way to do it. After that, now we're talking about advertising where, and to your point, they could be, long form, they could be interactive, they could be, hey, watch this ad and you're getting credits, whatever that happens to be. But that cost per acquisition has gotten so high that game developers and publishers have to look for.
But I think the other side is that at the same time, post Apple removing the IDFA, with all of the changes in terms of security and privacy regulation, all that kind of stuff going on, with the arguments going on with the various data platform providers and so on and so forth, targeting has become much, much harder to do. That just adds layers upon the cost of acquisition on top of the bidding wars. What I always found interesting is, even in these circumstances where you've got the big players, the monopoly guys or whatever, paying large amounts of money for ads, what we always found was the big players were ending up effectively bidding against themselves. And it was still possible for small players to get some attention, because if you show a player the same ad all the time, they get very bored very quickly and they lose effectiveness dramatically fast. So freshness, something brand new and thing, can reach through, but it can't scale. Do you find that, has that been an experience you found? That's what I've seen.
I think, yes, I have seen that, but I've also seen, there's been there's an old saying that you need to show someone the same message 6 times before they even will know what you're saying and recall it, right? So, if you're changing your, now we're talking about kind of creative iteration, but if you're changing your creative too often, then there's no kind of lock in for a viewer's and an audience's connection point of what am I looking at. We're in a place right now where not only is A/B testing easier than ever to do for online advertising, but now with advent of AI helping there as well, there's, it's almost an infinite power there that advertisers can then say, okay, well, what creative is working, what messaging is working, what graphic assets are working, and create that way. And now with AI can scale that. I think that's one of the positive uses of AI that we see right now.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely true. The only caveat I'd chuck in that is I think that we don't have the targeting sensitivity we had before, and that is made it more complicated, but the AI has compensated. I do think, though, again, to bring this back into the kind of original kind of premise, one of the lessons for me about this is that what seems to work is when you're effectively still telling a story, when you're still engaging people emotionally, when you're grabbing attention rather than just pulling machine. And the reason I mention that is because I think there's a thread between a lot of the things we've been talking about. We talk about the games having to have ways of commercializing. Well, if we can make you want to continue playing, if we can sustain your attention with this game at this time, our chance of doing that will improve. If we're trying to get new users into a game, if we can get your attention and pay respect to your other entertainment experiential needs and realize where we fit as a contrast, as a way of grabbing your attention within that, that's great. I think it all comes down to the fact that, we are in this complex space where there is essentially no time that a player doesn't have something presented to them that they can actually do. Does that make sense?
Are you when you say at no time a player is not being subjected to something they can do, are you talking within the game or just within media in general?
Generally. In general.
Totally. That's one of the things, I talk with executive teams about this often, is they don't necessarily know who their competitors are, or if they do, they're looking at, Steam charts of, okay, here's the top 10, or here's who we're gunning for, here's all of the games that are like the ones that we're competing with. But what about TikTok? What about YouTube? What about, Invincible just came on, the next series.
I saw the impact of that. It's amazing how much impact it had across multiple genres, not just video, not just Netflix, but gameplay dropped slightly when Invincible comes out. amazing.
And likewise, when a Minecraft movie comes out, gameplay for Minecraft goes skyrocketing and spikes. So we're in a transmedia world for sure, and anyone who is launching and operating a live service game that is not taking into account not only the obvious competitors, but the ones outside of the box that are competing for that attention, that's an oversight if they're not considering that.
100%. And again, that takes me back to this idea, which is in some ways the antidote to the performance-based ads that have become such a mainstream. And the very ads, the rewarded ads that I used to evangelize, the precision of measurement of the impact of your targeting, I would argue has become less strong in terms of its ability to have its impact than having a great visual story, a great connection, a great identifier. I'm basically talking about old school traditional branding. I feel like we've had this switch to the data side of the fence, and now I think we're really getting this pull back. I don't think we're ever going back to traditional marketing. Don't get me wrong. I don't over egg this case. We're not going to make it so that having a brand like Nike or Coke is the only thing you can be. But I think we can now see again why brands like Nike and Coke have still got the grasping power, even in the world of data. Do you have any kind of thoughts around that?
If I'm hearing you correctly and interpreting the question and comment correctly.
As you wish.
Okay. I have this conversation fairly often as well. And we talk to developers, really publishers mainly. And there's an expectation on the development and publishing side that the brand is going to carry a certain amount of weight. In some cases, that's true. If when EA says, okay, the next FC is coming out, or Sony says, okay, here comes God of War, the next God of War, or Valve says, okay, here's the next Counter-Strike. Yes, there's going to be cachet that comes with that brand for sure. However, if the game doesn't live up to the expectations, it doesn't matter what the brand is that's behind it, and that's just at the very top. Down, the players don't care about who's publishing it, who's developing it. Could it be an interesting little side note? The developer of Riot, the guy from Valorant left Riot, and he's doing this now. Okay, that's interesting. But how many stories, Oscar, have we seen where these quote unquote super studios have been built from ex Blizzard, ex Activision, ex EA that does not bear fruit? I think,
like you say, it has happened, but it's so rare.
It is, and not casting stones whatsoever. Game development's hard. It's hard to make a good game and run one. But my point is, the brand it only takes you so far, and it usually takes you not very far at all when it comes to games.
But that's kind of not where I was going. But I do understand. I think that's a really important point to make, because some people will conflate the brand of the studio as being important. And I think you're also right that sometimes the brand of the game isn't necessarily important. But I think that brand thinking, I'm an old school trained marketeer. I remember the characters in marketing, all that kind of stuff. Who cares? So I was brought up in that late 80s, early 90s era of what brand marketing could be, and very, very quickly learned that precision marketing, particularly obviously being in the early days of pioneering rewarded ads, absolutely data is king. But what I feel like I've seen is where there's consistency between the identity of the way that you play, with the identity of the art of the game, the identity of the narrative of the game, the identity of the player of the game in a consistent and powerful form, if that's delivered through the marketing as well, where that's authentic, that's incredibly powerful. But I feel like it's a really hard thing, and it's a bit like, I always take the analogy that trying to build a brand is like throwing stones in a pond, and it's only when you throw enough stones in that the pond raises its level. And it's probably a terrible analogy, but if you do an ad, you throw a stone, you get a ripple. Great. But I'm not interested in the ripple. I'm interested in how high the water table is. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, and I think, again, if I'm hearing you properly, I think when you're talking about that rising tide, or rising level of the water, I think what we're talking about is really building community and hype and pre-launch engagement and excitement. And a lot of that comes from, we haven't talked about influencers, right? Influencers and content creators are such a huge part of marketing a game nowadays. Not only do you have to really build a community, a strong community that's excited about the game that's coming pre-launch to put yourself in the best position for success, but now we're talking about getting your game in the hands of content creators who don't necessarily have the same benchmarks of success that you do. In fact, they probably don't. They have their own. And there's different levels of content creators. Some are demand a certain amount of views and dollars for that. Some are just happy to be a part of the system, and there's everything in between. So there's definitely different tiers of influencers. But content creators and influencers are so important because they're sharing the experience. Games are experiences. When you talk about brands, I don't look at games necessarily as the same as I would look at Nike or something I'm wearing. And the world obviously is different now than it was in the 80s and 90s, right? So back then, you're telling people, okay, this is a brand you want to wear and here's why. Here's a beer you want to drink and here's why. Here's a shoe you want to wear and here's why. Now, especially with
wearing
games,
a Fallout related. Hey, it's very old school, but it is actually this is a Fallout related T-shirt. Yeah, but it's designed to look like an old school Coke experience, which I find hilarious.
That's very meta. But where the games are selling experiences, and if it's single player, it's the experience that you're having with the story. You're talking about storytelling. If it's multiplayer, it's experiences that you're having with maybe the story, but maybe with your friends too. There's this whole genre of what's being called friend slop, which I take issue with that title, by the way.
Friend slop. I've not heard that term.
It's basically games that are quickly turned around, that aren't very polished, low polygon count, selling on Steam for $7, but are providing a weekend's worth of fun for a group of friends. And they treat it now like, instead of renting a movie, instead of going out and seeing a movie, they're buying a game, and there's 3 of their friends, 4 of their friends. They play it for a weekend, maybe they play it for 2 weekends, and then they're done with it. They have a blast. I think that friend slop term is derogatory. Personally, I think a game is a game and fun is fun, and it doesn't matter how high the resolution of the game experience is or how finished the game 100%. Is. If the kids are having fun, if players are having fun, they're having fun. But I'm sorry, I lost. What was the question? No.
It doesn't matter. The point is,
brand. We're talking about brand. So I think what we're doing, we're selling experiences, and when I bring content creators and influencers into the conversation, I'm talking about sharing those experiences. Not only are you watching maybe longer form slices of the game, but you are experiencing them through the lens of a creator that you probably are already following and like their takes on things. So whether they're like you and you trust them, or whether they're not like you but you find their perspective entertaining, doesn't matter. You're watching them play through a game to see if it's something that you want to play, you want to be a part of, or maybe you don't. You just like how watching them react in the world. But at the end of the day, we're selling experiences. And so if that game is fun, I don't know that coming in with a brand is critical. We've seen Claire Obscure comes from nowhere. Manor Lords, Blueprints. There's so many AAA down to indie titles that have hit Balatro that from no brand whatsoever, but the fun has been communicated. One of the things that I always tell my teams when we're sitting down to build a marketing strategy is we need to find the fun and show that fun. We need to figure out what that is. I want everyone on the team playing this game. I want to know exactly why you think it's fun, why you think it's working, what are the hooks, and now we need to communicate that. So I think you're absolutely right with regards to, performance marketing and digital ads, and it's getting harder and harder to, maybe it's getting harder and harder to target, but by the same token, it's getting easier and easier to find cohorts through content creators and influencers to really share those experiences.
And I love that. Particularly what I like about that is the idea of authentic, meaningful kind of like connection. So we have a meaningful connection with the people we watch playing those games that share their experiences. We may or may not agree with them, but we have some connection with them, even if it's only a parasocial one. We get to feel like we're part of a community that are sharing that perception, commenting on it, engaging, and the volume of video game based video content that there is out there being watched is enormous. It's one of the biggest things that people watch online is other people playing games. When I first joined, 98, we had an event called Quakedelica, which was kind of the pinnacle of the UK's first ever Quake tournament. We had Thresh flown over from the States. He's the guy who beat Carmack for the Ferrari. Lovely chap, really nice guy. And he beat the UK champion 57 to -1. And wow. It was an amazing thing to watch. And we're sitting there with a literal boxing ring stage set up, projections on the walls, etc. And you could tell, this is 98, we could tell this is something that people could watch. But I had no idea the scale in which esports and not even esports, just watching other people play, even people sitting there playing Dorfromantic, just talking about their daily lives. And people
totally
have an audience for that.
Well, remember in the arcades,
yeah.
I'm sure you sat there, with one of your favorite arcade games and watched other players play, right? Yeah, you're putting 100%. Your quarters up on the screen to play next, but yeah, you're 100%. Watching them. Wow, look at this. And remember when they would put screens up? Like I remember, especially for the more cinematic games like Dragon's Lair.
Yeah.
Space Ace. They would put actual screens on top so that because the crowds got so big, they couldn't see people over the shoulders. So I think, that's, I think, kind of the proof of concept there.
One of my favorite things growing up, I was a waiter at a UK holiday camp called Butlins, which probably no one on your side of the coast would know what that is, but it was a big thing in old school UK history. It's still hanging on when I was growing up, and I was in the arcades in that with 3 of my mates playing Gauntlet on our very last day of the season, and we had all of the guests who had been visiting there sitting around watching us play Gauntlet and throwing their pound coins at us so that we could keep playing. We played for like 3.5 hours.
Nice.
That's ridiculous. But it's the same principle.
Yeah, I remember. I seem to recall Gauntlet was like the very first 4-player.
Yeah, 4 players on one machine. Yeah.
4 on one machine. I don't recall one before that. And
Blue Elf needs food badly.
Yeah, exactly. A nice voice. Good. Nice impression there. That brought more players together, and it was a fun game.
Yeah,
and it had voice. Not many games had voice. Back then it was very colorful. It was a good game. It was a great game. But yeah, games are shared experiences. For a lot of people. I remember reading an article when online gaming first was becoming prevalent back. I don't know, we're in the early or late 90s, 90s, and I remember reading an article. I think it was in Wired. And one of the writer was saying, okay, now we're starting to see the proliferation of higher and higher baud rates for, those dial-up modems, right?
They went
from 77 to 14.4. Okay, so now maybe playing games outside of a MUD or a MU is going to be something that people can do. At the same time, roughly around the same time, remember Xbox added the X band, and it was an online component, which now through dial-up, through copper lines, you could actually play online. And I remember reading this article on Wired saying the future looks like it could be online games, but is anyone really going to play games online? Does anyone really care? Do people want to play with other people? Aren't gamers, just in their mom's basement in the dark playing by themselves? They're non-social beings, and that is just absolutely not the case. We know
never was true. Yeah,
it never was true.
You're talking to someone who had an Apple IIe with a 96 baud modem, and that was basically dialing up to the US systems like Shades. From the UK, and I'm lucky enough that I got to work with Richard Bartle for a little while when we were doing Wireplay in the early days. And in that case, that transition where, in fact, it was our team, the Wireplay team, that set up Sega's Europe-wide dial-up network so that you could have the Dreamcast functioning. So I'm that old. I got involved in all this. I mean, I wasn't as involved in the Sega thing, but it was the team I was working with that did that work, and it's it was fascinating seeing that happen in the first place. But to your point, there was absolutely a crying demand to be able to connect, but it was only people who had the specialist knowledge in those early days. And what we've done is we've stripped away the need for the specialist knowledge, emancipating, if you like, the capacity to connect. And I think what's special is we can sit together and we can watch Stranger Things. And Stranger Things is one of the few things we still have that water cooler moment. There are other things, series out there. I'm not trying to say that's the only thing, but Ted Lasso or whatever the thing. But we still have a few of these water cooler moments which we will talk about. Of, did you see that last episode? Wasn't that amazing? I think we still have a soap opera culture. I think there's still a soap opera culture out there, but I think what we've seen is the rise of games becoming part of that equation. Did you play Fortnite yet? When Baldur's Gate 3 came out, impact that had, I was running some tests for a really cool, in the end we couldn't make it commercial, but a really cool collectible card game on PC. And I didn't realize that was the weekend that Baldur's Gate 3 was launching. And we went from having like 2,000 people playing to no one. They came back the next week, but that's the kind of impact a kind of benchmark game like that can have on across the industry.
Totally. We're seeing kind of the old days of event television. It's hardly here anymore, but it still is to an extent, partially kind of diluted by binge watching. And if you're dropping a whole season at once, maybe you don't have, that, because everyone doesn't watch 12 episodes in one sitting. Yeah. But those that have the weeklies, I know we're a big Ted Lasso house here and a Stranger Things here. Only Murders in the Building, another big, episodic, water cooler moments. But it's interesting that you bring up, event related, events and marketing within games, and Fortnite, as we've seen Fortnite really perfecting that and bringing that into the spotlight with, Star Wars announcements and musical performances and event related things that they're only there. They only happen on that one day for those 2 hours and then they're gone. So and I've been a part of that myself, where my son has said, okay, we got to get home by 11 a.m. our time because, this concert's going to happen. So we need to make sure we're there. Those things are very interesting to me, just having also a bit of an event background. I do like seeing that. I do love how it brings people together for those shared time moments. Yes, we can have these shared experiences with games, especially for playing them live online. But I do love hey, let's all do this at the same time and then have that community experience. And when you're talking about, kind of tying back a couple things you've said here, you're talking about obviously other things that are taking our attention, whether it's terrestrial television, whether it's online looking at my phone, whether it's my mobile game versus the MMORPG that I'm playing at home. It's the attention economy that we're trying to bring people from one to the other. But we're also seeing, and live service games are really blazing this trail, and you alluded to it a second ago, which was people are having the experiences within the game. And you had mentioned like people maybe just hanging out in the lobby and talking, right? Such a huge part of what live service games have become is that, especially since, during COVID, when that may have been the only way that, players and people were able to, and kids especially who are home from school, were able to communicate with each other. So now we've gotten to a point where, you're hanging out in the Fortnite lobby before the game, talking and emoting, or you are playing Minecraft and you're on Discord talking about, let's build this. Hey, how, what are you doing? Hey, what are you up to this weekend? Tell me about the movie you saw last night. But also, we're seeing these sandbox games really take over. And some recent data has come out showing that the battle royale genre is taking a bit of a dip. Sandbox games have taken a big spike. Minecraft, Roblox being the predominant recipients of that attention that is being taken. That makes those games even stickier. People are spending time in there as a lifestyle, as something they choose to, not only because they want to build something in Minecraft or they want to play a new UGC game that came out in Roblox, but because they're getting together with their friends and they're talking during it, before it, after it. It's a social component that I think is underestimated.
I totally agree with that. And that connection, again, whether it's a connection with the identity of the game or the people, I think we're only magnified the more deeply we focus on the way the player it feels connected to the experience. And as you say, I think it's It's always been a struggle I've had where people ignore the social component in the design, which I find incredibly frustrating because I first entered this industry running an online gaming platform, and I could see it writ large with the way people were playing Counter-Strike or Quake or Bridge. Yes, we had a bridge service. We had chess, and it was when people had this moment of delight sharing, oh, did you do? And that, I think, is magical.
Totally.
That shared experience is what really, I think, transitions it. And there's nothing more truly engaging than when we have consequences. Games is the only medium where we can make choices and have consequences and talk about them together, which is why I love it. I love it.
Yeah, I agree.
Fred, thank you so much. So fantastic conversation. But what's the one thing you would like people to take away from this conversation?
I think when we're couching it in terms of live service, I think it's keep in mind, always remember that we are trying to build habits. We're trying to create experiences, create games that give players a reason to come and to stay. And if they leave, which they eventually will, maybe to come back and see what's new. It's not about just churning players through. That's not going to give you the healthiest ecosystem. You need to create an experience that is worthy of their time, respecting their time, and gives them a reason to come and stay or visit on a regular basis. I think creating habit, creating reason, that pull, that's going to put live service games in the best possible chance for success, I think.
I totally agree. Creating meaningful value, meaningful reasons why I should care, want to come back, setting expectations like that. It's fantastic. And it's something that I think we can do in games in really unique ways because of their ongoing nature, at least in terms of the LiveOps games' ongoing nature.
Yeah, definitely. And also to add to that, and maybe it's a part B, or it's a two-part answer, but knowing that launch day for a live service game is day one of many. It's not like the old days where you're going gold and you're getting the disc out and it's done and you move on. It's actually the first day. So you need to know that you need to give a game time. Live service games are best served when you've got at least a 1-year roadmap, if not a 3-year roadmap. Communicate that to the players so that players know that you are in it for the long haul so that they can trust you with their time. 100%. No one wants to go and try something new and get invested in it only for it to close in 3 months. Now, maybe on another conversation, we can talk about how that works, from a business perspective, with games, and how the games industry is much more like the movie industry than it really understands and it would care to admit. But it's really important to treat that day, have a party, definitely celebrate. But now the real work has begun on a live service game. Dedicate it, carve out the time to do that. And communicate that to the players so that they know there's a future.
I'd so buy that. It's absolutely true. And I'd even go as far. I think it's someone who responding to one of your panels. It might have been the previous day's panel, talking about how every game, essentially, even if it's not a LiveOps game, if you're trying to be a games company and you're not using LiveOps techniques, how are you going to maintain your portfolio? But that's another conversation for another time. Fred, you have been a delight. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. So this has been your LiveOps Lounge. We've discussed all sorts of things about the consequences of having this attention economy on the industry itself and wider subjects. As you can tell, we've only scratched the surface. I didn't even get into things like how we can learn from other media, like using soap opera structures in the way that we think about the engagement with players. But that's something I'm sure I'll cover off another time. Fred, thank you so much again. If anyone wants to get hold of you, what's the best way for them to find you, Fred?
They can find me on Twitter. I'm at fwhite319. I'm also just started on TikTok, Fred on Games, or feel free to drop me an email at fredmartinwhite@gmail.com.
Thanks, Fred. And we'll see you again next time on LiveOps Lounge.
Thank you.